right, welcome to another edition of the show, and welcome to another edition of Incredible Weather, brought to you by, I don't know, Mother Nature, I suppose. My goodness gracious, I talk about the weather a lot. We all talk about the weather a lot. It was our lead story today, and it will be probably tomorrow. Weather is something that people are absolutely, look, it's the go-to conversation. Whatever's going on, the weather impacts our life. And just, look, we need rain desperately. It is so dry out there. It is unbelievably dry. So I don't know if we can do a rain dance or whatever we can do to try and make it rain, but we need rain in a desperate kind of way right now. This heat is wonderful. It feels great. It's great beach weather. It's great baseball weather. It's great for those on vacation. We love it, but we need rain, folks. So let's all have a little rain dance, I guess. Maybe we can do that. Lots to get to today. Yesterday, during our Counselors on the Hot Seat, I can honestly say that, again, I've done this for a long time now. Time flies. And I've had many counselors sit across from me. And yesterday was the first time I saw counselors visibly frustrated, like noticeably frustrated with the situation. And Tony Mancini, he's been doing this a very, very long time. He's the deputy mayor. He's a veteran counselor, and he was visibly, I don't know if upset is the right way of describing it, but he's very, very frustrated. Becky Kent as well. And look, I suppose I think the biggest issue that they have is I think that people suggesting that they don't care about what's going on in the city, and they're in it for themselves. And look, I know you need a thick skin. I'm in the business of needing a thick skin. Believe me, I get it all. I hear it all. I get the nastiest emails, and I get great emails. So it's you need to be able to roll the punches, and they get that. But anyway, there is a serious state of flux with council right now. And the deputy mayor says he doesn't need, or rather the city's deputy mayor says the mayor does not need more power but better leadership. And made the comments yesterday. And Becky Kent, same thing, really called out Andy Fillmore's leadership yesterday, saying she has not seen the good leadership from him. And, of course, they praise and hearken back to the Mike Savage days. So one of the things that I'm going to ask you about, folks, is the state of council right now and what's going on. And do you think that there is good leadership from the mayor, Andy Fillmore, who will, of course, be joining this show? He'll be joining us from 10 to 11 on the 7th of August, which is coming up, I believe, in a week or so. Roughly a week. So what are your thoughts on the mayor and Andy Fillmore? And do you agree that with both these councillors that he has not demonstrated leadership as of yet? And do you think that strong mayor powers is something that the city needs? And look, it's coming, folks. It is coming. And people generally don't like change. Change is not easy to accept for any of us. And for these councillors, this will be brand new. The structure of council will change. To what degree, we don't know. It will be embedded in the legislation when it is tabled in the fall by this government, by the Houston government. But something that I want you to weigh in on. What are your thoughts? Does the city have good leadership? Do you like Andy Fillmore? Do you agree with the councillors that his leadership has not been what it should be at this point? Another interesting story that I came across. Look, we talk about bike lanes a lot, and rightfully so. But this is not unique to this city. And a story on the CTV website, I won't get into the nuts and bolts of it yet. I'll read a bit of it when we open the phone lines in about an hour's time. But basically in Edmonton, and I believe Calgary, they built a very expensive bike lane network about a decade ago, put a lot of money into it, and they're now deciding that they have to rip a portion of it up. And why? Because they need to make way for vehicle construction, for road construction. And the province is stepping in a similar way that the province may step in here and making these decisions, saying, look, these bike lanes are not being used. They're underutilized. They're taking up valuable real estate. and we need to redesign portions of our road infrastructure, and we have to tear them up. So this is something that that perhaps we could learn lessons from, or maybe not. But again, all tied in with all of the conversation, of course, surrounding municipal politics and the controversy is just that. So again, we will open the phone lines. I got some other things in the pile as well that we can get to. I'd like to thank Vanessa and N.S on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job, as always. All right, let's jump into our first guest. Nova Scotia's Environment Minister said last week there is no set deadline for Northern Pulp to submit a cleanup plan for its shuttered mill site near Pictou. Tim Hallman told reporters following a cabinet meeting that the next step for the insolvent company is to submit a reclamation plan for the site that will be assessed by his department. Joining us to discuss all of this is Raymond Plourde, Wilderness Coordinator with the Ecology Action Centre. Ray, thanks for joining the show.
My pleasure, Todd.
All right, so what are your thoughts in the no set deadline here for this?
Well, that's kind of strange that there's no legal requirement to provide a reclamation plan within a reasonable period of time after, the mill was shut, of course, several years ago because of the pipe plan that didn't go anywhere into the Northumberland Strait. And so we've seen the machinations of the company. They were proposing potentially a $3.7 billion combined giant pulp mill in Liverpool. Would have been over twice the size of the one in Pictou, which was the largest pulp mill by far in this province, and a whole bunch of biorefining stuff to add to that. Total price tag $3.7 million, and apparently Paper Excellence was expecting that the Nova Scotia government and the Canadian government would finance that to the tune of 94% of the cost, leaving the company itself to contribute only 6% of the project financing, and they still found it wouldn't meet their very high 14% internal rate of return, so they're kiboshing that and going with the no-mill scenario where they're going to sell off their assets, including a whole bunch of woodlands that Nova Scotians loan them money for. We probably won't see, more than half of that back. And they are going to wind down the operations in Nova Scotia. And there's no deadline for a plan, which is kind of weird. It would seem to me the government should be able to have some kind of deadline, or this could string on for potentially many, many more years. I'm also very disappointed that the settlement agreement that was reached under the creditor protection process through the BC court that the company chose to use rather than a Nova Scotia Supreme Court, where we might be more familiar with the situation. At any rate, they, in the settlement agreement with the province, under a no new mill scenario, agreed to pay $15 million towards the cleanup of the site at Abercrombie Point in Pictou, where the mill had operated for 53 years, as well as a sort of a sister company partially owned by the mill owners called Canso Chemicals, which lost tons and tons of mercury into the soil on that site. So it's a heavily, heavily polluted industrial site, and the negotiated agreement with the province under the creditor protection process in BC resulted in them agreeing to a $15 million contribution towards the cleanup of the Abercrombie Point site in Pictou County under a no new mill scenario. Mm-hmm. It would have been $30 million if they had gone forward with that project. They're not doing that, so it defaults to $15 million. And Todd, that $15 million probably won't even pay for the consultants' reports before they even decide on how they're going to approach cleaning up that highly polluted site. So we're in the dark as far as when this will happen, but we're not in the dark in terms of who's going to pay for most of it. it's going to fall to us, the taxpayers, as it almost always does in these large industrial projects. When the owners are done making money, they often do this. It's in the creditor protection documents that say that the company will, if need be, put the company into receivership, and because it is a single standalone company, legally under the paperwork, it's Northern Pulp, but it's owned by one of the world's richest families in Indonesia, and they could certainly pay for more than $15 million, but that's the agreement. So we're going to get stuck with a huge bill. If you look at it over the course of the life of that mill, over 53 years, it sucked up somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion worth of federal and provincial subsidies throughout that time. And Boat Harbor, which we're on the hook for $450 million, that's what it's pegged at now. It probably will rise from there once they get into it. And then there's the actual mill site. It's conceivable that could be anywhere from $250 million to $500 million cleanup. Company's only going to pay $15 million towards that, so that means we're going to pay for it. Total bills, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion in corporate subsidies.
Wow. Okay, so, I mean, dismantling the structure of it as well, even just getting it off the land, off the skyline, would be a start, would it not? Just when might that start to get that eyesore out of there?
Nobody knows, as the minister said, and there is no deadline for a reclamation plan, and that would include tearing down all of the old buildings. But of course, that's just the visual surface. Yeah. And it would be nice, I think, particularly for the people who live on Pictou Harbor, the town of Pictou, who stare across at it. The Pictou Landing First Nations would love to see that thing gone. But the real heavy pollution is in the ground. Tons of mercury, all kinds of other chemicals that were used in the very caustic bleaching process. You have to remember, this was a bleached kraft pulp mill, so it used, and it was a thermochemical mill, so it used a tremendous amount of chemicals. It polluted the waters in Boat Harbor, of course, but there's pollution within the soil itself. It goes down a long ways, and the mercury part is particularly concerning, as it is a neurotoxin. So, yeah, but to the question when, obviously the minister has said that there is no deadline. Hopefully they can find some power that the government would possess to force a deadline if the company doesn't want to do one, wants to just let it ride for a while. But one way or another, we're going to end up paying for the vast majority of the cleanup of that site, and it is going to be probably as expensive as cleaning up Boat Harbor.
What about Boat Harbor? Might that be a priority to get that cleaned up, considering the environmental racism that happened there?
Well, that project is more advanced in that there has been planning because it's all on the government, so therefore the taxpayer. So there's no reason to wait for the company to do anything about it, to submit reclamation plans. It's on us, thanks to an indemnity agreement that a previous government had signed a long time ago that held the company blameless, if you will, for any cleanup costs. That is not the same case with the mill site itself. However, the company, which is Sinarmas, Paper Excellence, there's quite a large corporate structure, but at the end they've walled off Northern Pulp as its own entity and have said that, if after the sale of their assets, mostly the forest timberlands that we Nova Scotians loan them the money to buy, and we'll never see all of it back again now, they'll sell that off and so on. But once all the monies have been dispersed to the creditors, most of whom are actually their own company, it's quite a tale. The rest of it falls to us. And so Boat Harbor should proceed before the mill site gets active because of the complication of this ownership and the lack of a clear deadline. But it will have to happen, and it will cost taxpayers a lot of money, just like a lot of these big industrial natural resource extraction type projects end up doing. I mean, we have hundreds of millions of dollars of liabilities on the public taxpayer books for all these old gold mines that were never properly reclaimed. We have one current or former gold mine in Moose River where the Australian owner, is fighting the government on submitting a reclamation plan and paying for the cleanup of that site. Whether you look at the old Sydney tar ponds, for example, many hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps north of $1 billion, went into that from government subsidies, and then the cleanup fell to the taxpayer as well. So this is kind of a repeating scenario, not just in Nova Scotia, but across the country. You look at abandoned oil wells in Alberta or abandoned coal mines in British Columbia. The same scenario repeats itself. Corporate entities extract the profit, and then when it's time for dealing with the pollution and the cleanup, they either sell to another smaller company that can't afford to do it, or they themselves put themselves into bankruptcy, as Northern Pulp, Paper Excellence is prepared to do with Northern Pulp to shut that down and limit its exposure to the cleanup costs. It's a familiar story right across the country, and it's something we really should think about. And frankly, our Premier should think about when he talks about the wonderful benefits of resource extraction, but never looks at the downside.
Ray, always a good chat. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
My pleasure, Todd, always.
All right, take care. Raymond Plourde, Wilderness Coordinator with the Ecology Action Centre here in Halifax. A study to see if climate change means more invasive mosquitoes in Nova Scotia. We'll talk about that when we come back. All right, just recently in the Chronicle Herald, researchers at Acadia University are hoping that the public can help them as they investigate the effects and dangers of climate change on mosquito populations in Atlantic Canada. Laura Ferguson of Acadia's Biology Department said the project started last year. Joining us to talk about all this is Laura Ferguson, Biologist and Assistant Professor at Acadia University. Laura, thanks for joining the show.
Hi, Todd. No problem.
All right, so tell us about this, I guess. First off, tell us about what you guys are up to.
Yeah, so we've been tracking mosquito populations in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI for the last few years now, trying to get a handle on what our mosquitoes are doing here. We've got, over 40 species across the Maritimes, close to 50 actually. And we're interested in how climate change, warming winters, longer fall seasons, earlier springs, all of those things are changing which mosquitoes we have here and just how many of them.
All right.
So we've been doing some... Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No. So tell us about how you're going about getting the data.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had people out in the field doing their own collections, some students that have been working really hard. They go out there every day, all day, collecting mosquitoes, both the babies and the adults that are flying around. But that's pretty intensive work, and it's expensive to travel around and do all of that. And so to keep an eye on these things over a longer period of time, like if we really want to track these populations, we need data every year, and that can be difficult to get. So what we're asking for is some help from the public to actually collect mosquitoes that land on themselves as they walk through some of the parks that we have stations set up in. That allows us to hopefully over time collect over a wide geographic area and to not have to put in quite so much intensive sampling effort across a larger region like the Maritime provinces.
How much participation have you gotten so far?
It's been pretty great so far. So we really only have a couple of stations set up because this is just our second year of trying this sort of community participation. Last year, we ran in 2 locations in New Brunswick. This year, we're running just 2 locations here in the Valley, one set up in Wolfville and one in Kentville. And then depending on how these go, we're hoping that over time we'll expand out further across Nova Scotia and through the Maritimes as well. So last year we brought in hundreds of mosquito samples from the public. So that was awesome. That gave us a lot of data to work with and gave us a lot of hope that this kind of study could actually be used for annual mosquito surveillance. And we're seeing, similar uptake right now in the valley as well. But it has been really dry here, as we all know. It's been pretty dry and hot. So the mosquito numbers aren't maybe quite as high as when we have a warm but wet summer.
Okay, so anything interesting when it comes to the data so far that you've come up with, or what can you tell us about so far, what findings you might have?
Well, so far we've got a very healthy, thriving mosquito population in the Maritimes. Like I said, we've got lots of different species here. We have an invasive species called Aedes japonicus that has really taken off across the Maritime provinces. First showed up in the sort of mid-2000s and now is one of the most abundant and common species that we find right across the whole season. So that's kind of an interesting one. We haven't found some of the more worrisome invasive species that have been spreading across the globe right now, like the Asian tiger mosquito or the yellow fever mosquito. Those ones are not here. There are some projections that suggest that they may show up here eventually with climate change, but we're not detecting them yet, so that's good news at least. And lots of interesting stories from people along the way as well. Certainly, we're seeing that in some areas, some of our really voracious salt marsh mosquitoes that tend to be pretty relentless in their pursuit of people throughout the day and night are certainly causing a lot of nuisance in some areas.
Yeah, call me naive, but I thought a mosquito was a mosquito. I had no idea that there were so many variations of mosquitoes and different species of mosquitoes. To me, they're just an annoyance. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And it's interesting when you start learning about a critter like this, just how much you start to find out. And lots of different species, and many of them don't actually even feed on people. Some of them specialize on birds or frogs or other kinds of animals as well.
All right, so obviously, like anything in the ecosystem, it's the health of one species. It's interlinked and connected. So, what might it say about the ecosystem in general, a healthy mosquito population or not?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Absolutely. Mosquitoes are very interlinked because they're food for other animals. They're a nuisance for us. And yes, they carry disease, particularly in some other regions of the world that have to worry about that a little bit more than we do. And so absolutely, they're filling a lot of roles. So having a healthy mosquito population right now, essentially what that's telling us, it's hard to paint a larger picture just from looking at this one animal, but certainly it tells us that at least higher temperatures, the kinds that we're experiencing here, are pretty permissive, at least for some species of insects like this. And so far, it seems like they're benefiting from the warming that's associated with climate change.
What about diseases and what they might bring? Any concerns there that perhaps diseases might be introduced to the region that perhaps we haven't seen or had?
Yeah, that's one thing that we certainly always want to keep our eye on with mosquitoes. We've been pretty protected here in the Maritime provinces historically from mosquito-borne diseases. And that's partially due to some of our lower temperatures. So as things start to warm, what we want to do is keep an eye on it and kind of say, okay, well, it's a possibility, so we better be out there doing surveillance so that we can keep track of whether or not we think that mosquito-borne diseases could become any worse. So one of the things that we're tracking right now and thinking a lot about are things like West Nile virus, which we know is in Canada, but typically we don't see very much of it in the Maritime provinces. And so one thing we're trying to track is whether we have any in our mosquitoes at all, and we haven't found any over the last couple of years. And then try and figure out, okay, well, if it's in, say, Quebec and Ontario, why don't we have it here in the Maritimes? Is it because of our temperatures? And therefore, as it warms, will something like that become a larger issue?
All right. If people want to know more about your work or they want to participate in the work, where can they find it online?
Yeah, so you can find it at fergusonlab.ca is where you can find out a little bit more, and certainly available for contact via email on that website as well. And if you're in the Valley area, if you're walking through Wolfville around Willow Park, or if you're in Kentville around Miners Marsh, certainly pick up a vial as you're walking through. You'll see a little station with 2 buckets, one for pickup and one for drop-off. Mm-hmm. And as you're walking through, if you just have a mosquito land on you, just catch it in the vial. Some of them are pretty slow, and you can just catch them right in there. And then you drop it off in the drop-off bucket on your way out, and then we'll collect them all and identify them.
Should have asked this before, but does it have to be alive, or can you kill it and then put it in?
Oh, no, you can give it a little slap. That's fine.
All right, sounds good. Laura, great work. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate your time.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
All right, take care. Laura Ferguson, Biologist and Assistant Professor at Acadia University. A new report by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives says the federal public service could shed almost 60,000 jobs over the next 4 years as Ottawa looks to cut costs. We'll discuss this when we come back. A report by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives says the federal public service could shed almost 60,000 jobs over the next 4 years as Ottawa looks to cut costs. Joining us to discuss all of this is David Macdonald, Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, Senior Economist. David, thanks for joining the show.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us why, where your data is coming from here. Why do you say why 60,000?
Yeah, so we've got two rounds of cuts that are happening at about the same time. The first was around from the Trudeau government in the 2023 budget, which is hitting right now. And then the second is these proposed Carney cuts, where we got more details just earlier this month about how much they want to cut in terms of staffing, in addition to other things. But this latest analysis look more at staffing. And so you can then go through based on which departments are supposed to cut how much, what the aggregate impact would be of these two waves of cuts between now and 2028. There's a couple departments that are protected from cuts. D&D, RCMP, Border Services are protected, but all the other departments, in essence, are on the block and have to submit plans by the end of the summer detailing how they would cut 15% of their transfers, but also 15% of their staffing costs.
How big is the public sector in Canada? Just kind of roughly.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me see on live radio how much we've got here.
Talking hundreds of thousands of workers?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And from while you're perhaps looking that information up, was the public sector it grew exponentially over the last 10 or so years under the Trudeau watch, and COVID was part of that. But lots of growth in the public sector. Is that true or no?
Yeah, the last couple of years we have seen growth. In part, it was a reaction to bad service levels. So you saw long wait list to get passport. You called CRA and you wait on hold for 8 hours and no one was there. And so there was a lot of pressure to try to improve the service levels. And so there's been a real uptick in staffing to attempt to get better service levels. And so you probably are seeing a bit of a swing. Mm-hmm. So you see bad service levels, you hire a bunch of people, try to make service levels better. So, wait on hold for 8 hours and you can get a passport. And then you say, oh my gosh, we hired all these people. We got to cut back. And so you cut back on the people, and it takes a couple of years for service levels to decline, and then you go through the whole cycle, starts over again.
Okay, and what's the union been saying on this? Obviously, the union's pushing back hard, I'm assuming?
I'm assuming, yeah. So they, at this point, they were concerned about the Trudeau cuts, which have already come into play. There's about 10,000 positions lost already. And then there's another about 50,000 that would come on top of that to make a total of almost 60,000 across the entire public sector. And so, that type of impact would almost certainly impact services. But what's interesting is that the savings that the Carney government is looking for, about half of it is actually transfers to someone else. So the big transfers like equalization or the Canada Health transfer, those are protected. But there's a whole bunch of other transfers that departments do to other levels of government that aren't those things. So disaster assistance, for instance, is one of the big transfers from the federal government. That goes to the provinces to help with disasters. There's big transfers to First Nations to provide health and education. The provincial versions of those transfers are protected, but the transfers to First Nations are not protected. And so these departments have to now come up with plans on how they're going to cut these big transfers in addition to the staff by 15%.
Okay, fundamentally, what's your take on these types of cuts? I guess we know that the public sector is an easy target for people who aren't, or in particular, aren't in the public sector, and in much of the media, I get it that it's an easy, they're kind of cannon fodder for these types of discussions. Well, what's your take on the public sector and its vibrancy, and does a large public sector necessarily translate into a good, efficient public sector?
Well, I mean, what you want is a public sector that delivers services to Canadians when they need them. And so some of the biggest impacts in terms of staffing are in frontline agencies where people will notice. This is the big three here that are going to be impacted are CRA, which is business and personal taxes, as well as all the big transfers. So, your Canada Child Benefit didn't come in, you have a problem with old age security, this is who you will call. And if there's no one to pick up the phone or you're going to wait on hold for longer, that's a problem. ESDC is the second biggest one. They're the ones that administer employment insurance. They also administer the Canada Pension Plan. So again, if you've got problems there, check didn't come in, you changed bank accounts, you got to fix this, you're going to wait longer. And the third one is CIC. So this is immigration. But it's also passports. So if you've got some immigration problem or you want to get a passport, you want it quickly, these are the types of services that are going to be impacted. So it's fine to say, sure, we'll just cut a whole bunch of staff, save the money, it's fine. Except then on the other hand, you say, well, you want to cut that staff and then wait on hold for 8 hours because you've got a problem with your taxes, you got a problem with EI, you got a problem with your passport. Folks, I think, are a little more reticent once you connect services with those cuts. And that's unfortunately my concern here is that this is exactly what we're going to see. We're going to see savings, sure, but we're going to see savings because people are waiting on hold. They can't get somebody. Or the promise is they get AI instead. I mean, this was, ChatGPT picks up the phone and makes up some story about which tax break you should or should not claim, or says, yeah, I fixed your AI thing, but it did nothing instead, or it gives you the wrong advice. That's one of the concerns about technology is it might look good up front, but once you start implementing it, it's often much better to be able to talk to an actual person who can fix your problem.
Who makes the decisions as to who gets cut? Because what I'm getting at is that perhaps we need to look at some managerial levels, and we know that perhaps that's disproportionate. Instead of rank and file members, people on the phones, as you say, delivering the services. If managers are told to make cuts, they're not going to cut their own ranks. They're going to cut the workers' ranks.
Yeah, so right now it's a 15% across the board. So there isn't particular direction to say, this much against the executive, this much against frontline staff. It's not like that. It's just across the board, fairly indiscriminate, frankly. And that is part of the concern, too, is it's not like this is a bottom-up exercise. It's top-down. We want 15%. Just make it happen. We don't care what services get impacted. Make it happen. Mm-hmm. And so that was the direction that went out to ministers at the start of July. And so, all these things, 15% across the board of all of these pieces that we talked about, they'll have to submit something by the end of the summer to finance. And then presumably finance will choose some of those plans and not others, I guess, or choose half of those plans. And so what we will probably see is that we're going to have a budget this fall, finally. And so in that budget, we will probably get a potentially more detailed picture of what these cuts will look like, or at least we will know in the aggregate what they're attempting to save. We probably won't at that point know which services will be impacted or even which departments will be impacted. Often with these cuts, the idea is you leave the details till it's already done. Mm-hmm. So you don't tell people that you're going to cut more people at CRA and they won't be able to get somebody on the phone because that's going to upset people. You just don't tell them, and you put a big round number in the budget, maybe $20 billion or whatever, and then we'll probably have more details in the spring of next year as to what departments are actually going to do, because they'll have to disclose it in what are called departmental plans. So it'll be a little while probably before we get real details on what this is going to look like.
You mentioned AI, and obviously it's not perfect and it's got its pitfalls, but AI, I think it's evident that in the decades to come at least, we'll have an expanding role, not only in government, but everywhere, public, private sector, broadcasting, whatever. AI is not going away, I guess is what I'm getting at. So what's your take on AI and its role in the sphere?
It can be very helpful. I use AI all the time. The issue, though, is that you want to use AI in an area where you already know a lot of the details. Like if you're not really clear on something, don't use AI because it'll just make stuff up and you won't know the difference. Mm-hmm. And this is the trouble if you're trying to get details on your business taxes and you're not sure whether this deduction applies to you or not, or you're trying to fix some EI problem. You don't know the EI system. You're not an expert on it. You want to be able to talk to some expert in the government to fix your problem. You don't want AI to give you some tale and make up an answer and then do nothing. And then you realize 3 years from now you filled out this form wrong and now you owe CRA a big backlog of taxes. Like that's the real danger here, is that AI will hallucinate. It will make things up. And that's fine if you're, creating funny poems about the NHL. It's a very different story when, you filed your taxes incorrectly and now you're on the hook for money. That's the kind of thing where you do want a human in the loop to make sure that it's not telling you the wrong answer, which it absolutely will all the time.
Okay, well, how about attrition? You talked about this earlier. Do you think that a lot of this can get done through attrition and through early retirements and that avenue, as opposed to kind of getting or laying people off who are in the prime of their career, just beginning their career with the public sector?
Yeah, I mean, what will likely happen is that there will likely be buyouts of some description, and so folks who at the end of their career, they're sort of 60, will get some offer to leave early and retire. And so it depends on where their position is. If their position is someplace important, if you're managing a call center and you're a senior manager, you know it really well, you can't just leave that position open and delete it. You have to replace that person. Now, maybe you're going to replace them with someone cheaper. Everybody moves up the line and the person at the bottom gets laid off. Probably what happens is you get bio packages first. At the other end, you'll eliminate term contracts. So these are going to be more short-term contracts that people will string together to create a full-time job. But those will be eliminated, and sort of summer employment for students, student employment, that'll be eliminated. And then you may start to get into the to the indeterminates. So this is going to be people who are, hired full-time in essence. And so there may well be layoffs there, and particularly for people who don't have a lot of seniority. But that will be the last phase of it. It's very dependent, too, on the department. I mean, some departments are just younger departments, and so you don't have a lot of people to retire. And so you're going to end up cutting off the terms first, and then you're going to move into the indeterminates. And it's very much on a department-by-department basis. They all have to make these cuts or submit these plans. And so, if you are laid off as indeterminate, you go through what's called workforce adjustment. So you kind of go back into the job pool for other positions, and you may get another position someplace else, or you may not. And so it's going to be pretty dependent on how, the age profile of different departments and how many terms determinate.
David, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. David Macdonald, Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, Senior Economist. When we come back, we're going to give away some tickets to the 22 and under 2025 baseball championships, which are going on in our region next, rather they're scheduled for August. So we're going to give away some tickets for that. Listen for your cue to call. And also we're going to talk about how you can take advantage of the best deals when it comes to travel in your own backyard this summer. That when we come back.
X.
All right, before I get to my next guest, coming up in August is the 22 and under 2025 baseball championships here in Halifax. A fantastic event, great baseball. We have some tickets to give away. 2 sets of 4 for the games Manitoba versus Ontario and Ontario versus PEI at the Mainland Common. If you'd like to get 2 sets of 4 tickets, we're giving away 2 sets. Each caller's 4 and 5 right now at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000 gets you 2 sets or 4 tickets, and we're giving away 2 pairs. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. All right, joining me now is Sara Mills, a local blogger and travel influencer. Sara, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
All right, so ran across a story in the Chronicle Herald how Nova Scotians can take advantage of the best deals in their backyards this summer, and how Canada wins. Halifax-based travel influencer Sara Mills shares tips for staycations in Nova Scotia. Lots to do in our own backyard, no doubt, right?
There certainly is so much.
All right, so give us some advice. Espouse your wisdom upon us, please.
I think my best advice for exploring your own backyard is to look at it through fresh eyes, as if you are visiting somewhere that you've never been before. I think sometimes we take for granted everything that's here. And after a decade of blogging and acting as travel media, we still hear every single week, people saying, I had no idea that was there. So I think that's the number one thing. And then I would also say to look for, we have a lot of really unique experiences. So for example, staying at an inn that offers a cooking class or, tasting menus at a different boutique accommodation instead of just your traditional hotels and things.
All right. What are some I guess, name drop, I suppose. What are some of your faves?
Name drop. Okay. Well, we just did a cooking class recently in Italian. We learned how to make fresh pasta at the Flying Inn Cookery. That's on the Knoll Shore. Really beautiful. It's really close to Burnt Coat Head Park. If folks haven't been there, that's definitely something to check out. Taddingstone Inn in Wolfville is another favorite. They do Friday evening tasting menus, 6-course tasting menus. You can do wine pairings. There's just so many different things. And then I would also say, our beaches and our hiking trails and some of the more underrated parts of the province. I'm thinking the Eastern Shore, like Guysborough, and even parts of the Bay of Fundy, like out towards Advocate, past Parsborough. When you get out of course, we love Halifax and we love Cape Breton, but there's so much more to see.
Why do you think some of those remain kind of undiscovered, or is it just geography, just out of the way, or what?
I don't think it's geography. I think there's a couple of things at play. Halifax, certain regions, South Shore, Halifax, Peggy's Cove, Cape Breton get a lot of attention because they have the infrastructure to support that attention. Some of the more rural communities that we have don't necessarily have all of that infrastructure, but that doesn't mean we as individuals can't go out and explore those things ourselves. Like you can go into a slot canyon in Advocate. You can see sea stacks out there. You can walk the ocean floor in many, many parts along the Bay of Fundy. And there's so many opportunities for having unique experience, not to mention we have stunning hiking trails throughout the province, stunning beaches throughout the province. Everybody knows about our South Shore beaches, but I don't think everybody knows about our Eastern Shore and about the North Shore, which has the warmest waters in Nova Scotia, and beautiful sandy beaches with, miles and miles of, sand to walk on.
Yeah, my favorite beach, Kelly and I's favorite beach now is Clam Harbor. It's just unbelievable how beautiful that is.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And that is just kind of far enough out of the way that it's not too packed, and parking's good, and
right.
It's about an hour drive from Halifax, but it's perfect. It absolutely is gorgeous, and there's plenty of those. Well, how about in Halifax? Anything that perhaps people are overlooking in Halifax itself?
Oh, there's so much in Halifax, and there's always new things. We call Halifax home, so really proud of our city. But I think even if you've been recently, come again, because there's so many new things on the waterfront. The first thing that comes to mind for me is go visit George's Island. I think a lot of people still haven't done that, and that's a really cool experience. Really affordable, cool experience that you can have. And just walking the waterfront, we have one of the longest continuous boardwalks in Nova Scotia, North America. Yeah. So that is worth checking out. Loads of new restaurants. You can take sailing tours. You can rent a Sea-Doo. You can go kayaking. There's just so much.
How about national parks? What any recommendations for national? I'm sure you've got some, but what do you recommend when it comes to our national parks?
Yeah, our national parks here in Nova Scotia are Kedzie, which of course is spectacular, and then Cape Breton Highlands National Park, both amazing. I think if I had to choose for hiking, I'm going to choose Cape Breton every time because that's world-class hiking, and you can never run out of trails there. With Kedzie, I think what gets overlooked is the seaside adjunct. Everybody goes to Kedzie proper, but I don't think everybody goes to the seaside section, and there are beautiful, beautiful beaches there. It's a little hike to get in, but certainly worth it. And the Canada Pass this year that's free for everyone gives us access to all of these parks and museums and all kinds of experiences. And there's discounted, transportation that's available to people this year, which isn't normally the case. So I think taking advantage of that is a really great way to sort of explore our own backyard, the way we would explore if we were traveling somewhere new.
All right. What, anything to avoid, I suppose?
I don't know. I don't think there's anything to avoid. I think it's just, I think responsible tourism is important. So I'm talking about rural markets, but do be respectful if you are visiting somewhere that doesn't have a lot of infrastructure, meaning there might not be, too much parking, or there might not be, garbage facilities. So pack it in, pack it out, just be a responsible traveler, respect this land that we call home, and leave it better than you found it for the next person, I think is my best piece of advice.
All right, and if people want to follow you online, direct people where they can get your insights and your advice and all that you do.
Yeah, of course. We are Dashboard Living everywhere, all of the social media platforms, primarily Instagram and Facebook, and then we have a blog that's just dashboardliving.com where we talk about all kinds of things to do. Actually, we share daily right now, starting today on Instagram, daily things to do in and around Nova Scotia, how to have unique experiences.
Okay, great stuff, Sarah. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Sara Mills, local blogger and travel influencer. Your calls, what is on your mind? Give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Something that we can talk about is the continuing saga around City Hall and HRM Council right now. The city's deputy mayor says the mayor doesn't need more power, but better leadership. He made those comments here yesterday on the show. Becky Kent made similar comments as well on the show. What are your thoughts on that, folks? 902-405-6000. Do we need better leadership out of the mayor? Has the mayor not demonstrated good leadership to this point? And do you think that he should be given strong mayor powers by the province? One of the things that you can talk about, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, time to take your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. A few things here in the pile. This first up, it's kind of a carryover from yesterday in which I had Tony Mancini and Becky Kent here in studio. And the deputy mayor, Tony Mancini, said, and Becky Kent echoed the comments, said that the mayor doesn't need more power but needs to demonstrate better leadership. The comments come amidst controversy of strong mayor powers, of course. The HRM's deputy mayor says that Fillmore likely feels hampered with failed motions in council. And he says that council needs to work together. Mancini says interference from the premier is also a factor, saying Tim Houston has the ability to interfere in council functions, but he'd like to see the premier discussed and pick up the phone and make phone calls as opposed to have conversations through the media. So what are your thoughts on this, folks? Do you agree with the two councillors who were in studio yesterday, Tony Mancini and Becky Kent, that Mayor Andy Fillmore has not demonstrated leadership ability or leadership quality to their satisfaction? And instead of seeking strong mayor powers, perhaps demonstrate being a stronger mayor. Do you agree with that or do you disagree with that? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that the province should grant strong mayor powers to Andy Fillmore, who will be in studio here, by the way, on the 7th of August, taking your calls from 10 to 11? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. What's your take on all this or whatever else you've got in your mind? Again, 902-405-6000. Jim, hello.
Good morning, Todd. How you doing?
I'm well. You?
Good. I listened to the show there. I was actually blueberry picking yesterday in a good mood till I listened to your show.
There you go.
And that was because of Becky Kent, Councillor Becky Kent, and Councillor Mancini. I heard the comments from both, particularly Councillor Kent, and I would call it condemnation, I guess, or certainly an expression of a very strong disapproval of the mayor. I think she made that quite clear openly, and she's done that in the past, too, a little bit, in her own way. And also Mancini, cry me a river, will you? I mean, he's been there quite a while. Kent's been there quite a while. Austin's been there quite a while. Clary's been there quite a while. So I think what they've done to me anyway, maybe others that are listening, I strongly believe in terms of office, but in particular their comments in regard to the mayor. They don't seem to want to acknowledge or at least understand that the mayor's mandate that was given to him is completely different than the mandate that was given to them as individual councillors. And that creates a problem because they seem to ignore that he has a mandate. But what puzzles me the most, perhaps you could answer this for me, I don't think in listening to your show I've ever heard any one of those councillors, the four that I just mentioned, explain explicitly why they have a problem with doing a second look at our financial situation when there's an acceleration of money in a particular project, which happens to be the bike lanes.
Well, Tony Mancini, he passed a motion, or he tabled a motion which passed, which is doing just that. It's exploring the bike lane costs. So what about that?
Then what's his problem with the mayor?
Well,
why did he vote the mayor down when the mayor suggested Morris Street was, he wanted to pause it? He didn't say cancel it in the beginning.
Yeah.
He just wanted to pause it and then give it a second look. But Mancini jumped on board and said, no way.
Well, I suppose I think that I can't speak for them, but I think that they said that basically a pause would mean that would end tenders that are out this year and work that is undergoing on this year, which could create, I don't know, legal problems or cost the city money to cancel ongoing projects that are already started. That to me is I think the reason why they didn't go with the mayor's motion.
Yeah. Okay. Another point I have is that if you look at the terms of office for instance, the police commission.
Yeah.
Mancini and Kent have been on that more than, it's usually 3 years, but you can get an extension for another 3 years. They've had that. Now they've got another one, and it's voted on by council, but you had 4 new councillors, from my understanding, that were just recently elected that volunteered to be part of that police commission. They wanted, a shot at it. And Kent and Mancini still came out on top. They should have withdrew their position and say, okay, we've done 3, 6 years, whatever it is on the commission. Let's give these new councillors some exposure and see what kind of ideas they have. That, to me, is leadership. So they certainly haven't displayed that they have the leadership ability within themselves. I'm not going to say that they don't work hard. I'm sure they do. Mm-hmm. But if you really look at it in the context of how long they've served and why they didn't move aside and let other councillors that are new an opportunity to go on the police commission in particular, maybe other committees too, it speaks something about leadership and what I would call, they still like to have that groupthink or that power themselves to be able to push their mandate. What do you think of that?
Well, I suppose that's an interesting take on it. So your takeaway is that you feel as though that their comments were unjustified. Is that what I'm reading from you, Jim? When it comes to the
unjustified, and for one other reason, the province, the premier and his cabinet have not come out yet. We don't even know what they're going to do. They're talking about giving some more, I guess if you want to use the term, powers for the mayor. Mm-hmm. But we have no idea if there's going to be a veto in there. So they're jumping the gun and assuming that the mayor is going to come in with a hammer and start things right away.
Well, so Jim, I think it's Jim. I'm sorry to interrupt you, my friend, but I think it's pretty obvious. Okay. I think it's pretty obvious that the province wants Mayor Fillmore to have these powers for a reason, right? I think that is perhaps something that. What is the motivation for the premier of the province to want Mayor Fillmore to have these strong mayor powers? I think that should be explored. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think if you want to rate, of course, if you feel it or anybody feels that there's a hidden motivation, then, and certainly how they go about exploring that, I don't know. But I will reiterate one more time again, and I hope the listeners that maybe they support my opinion on this, I'll give it to you. I hope they call into your show, because your show is an excellent source of public outcry, if you want, that the mayor is elected by the majority, the mandate of HRM, and people, know that. And he has a mandate. He has a mandate that he put into his platform. And when he sits down with the councillors don't seem to recognize his mandate. They'll look at the mayor's position as, like I said before, you're equal to us on council, and you can go cut ribbons all day after. So they're not recognizing his mandate. That's the important thing for me. As far as the premier goes, we'll wait and see what he has in his document when it comes out, and I think that'll be telling us to exactly where they might be headed with that.
Okay, fair enough, Jim. Appreciate the call.
Take care.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. The concept of leadership in the political sense, how do you define leadership? And look, if you fundamentally disagree with something that the mayor wants to do, then it's easy to default to that's poor leadership, right? He doesn't agree with them with the rest of with much of council on some of these key issues, some of these core issues. Has a different vision, so it's easy to label him as having bad leadership if you don't agree with him. And I don't know that that's fair. I don't know what Mayor Fillmore could do to demonstrate better leadership when it comes to his view on bike lanes. They fundamentally disagree. So I guess by default you could label him as having poor leadership. I don't know. 902-405-6000. Mike, hello.
Hey, Todd. How you doing this morning?
I'm well, you?
I'm good. Two things. The first one, I guess, is kind of a joke, but kind of not. Do you find it funny or ironic that Fillmore, all this controversy and scandal around him already, and he came from Trudeau's party?
Well, there's not scandal. I don't think scandals are the right term.
Not scandal, but controversy.
Yeah, controversy for sure.
I find that funny. I don't know.
Why do you find that funny?
Well, just because all the controversy that came from Trudeau and his Liberals, and now it's just kind of followed him right into HRM. Maybe not funny, maybe more ironic. I don't know. It's just I might be the only one who noticed that. I don't know, but anyway, the other thing is this might be a dumb idea. I don't know. What about a temporary strong mayor power where he's instated for the rest of this term, and then when the city goes to vote again, they can vote? Is strong mayor power a good thing? Is it working, or should we go back to how we had it before?
Yeah, potentially, I suppose that could be the case. Kind of give it a trial run, I suppose. That's kind of what you're getting at, right? Give it a trial run.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, the citizens, the people, are the ones who are making the decision.
Yeah, I suppose ultimately that could happen anyway, right? Because when all is said and done, democracy should be about change and should be fluid. So if in fact the province implements strong mayor powers and it's something that is not popular or is considered to be not of value or detrimental to the city in some way, perhaps the electorate could demand change. And if the provincial government determines that is the political wins, then they'll react to that. So I suppose, Mike, everything's a trial period to a degree, is it not?
I guess you're right. Yeah, when it comes to elections every 4 years, I guess everything is trial or hit or miss. But yeah. I think the biggest problem is we've got to find a way to get more people engaged and get more people to vote.
Yeah. And
then people say that these councillors are stagnant and they're pushing their own agenda, but maybe they're not pushing their own agenda, but they're pushing the agenda of the very few that vote every time. We need to get more people engaged and more people voting in every election.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Stage.
That's a good point. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Get some open lines for you folks. Give us a call. What is on your mind today? 902-405-6000. Do you agree with Andy Fillmore, or rather with Tony Mancini and Becky Kent, who were on the show yesterday, who say that the mayor needs to demonstrate more leadership? They're disappointed, paraphrasing, to this point, his leadership or lack thereof, and suggest that instead of seeking strong mayor powers, should demonstrate better leadership. Do you agree with that? And should the province grant strong mayor powers? Because ultimately it's up to the province to do so. 902-405-6000. We'll be back. All right, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. What are your thoughts on the mayor and Andy Fillmore here in HRM under fire by some, including council, some of his own members of council who are suggesting that he has not demonstrated proper leadership, including those comments came from Becky Kent yesterday, paraphrasing, of course, what she said, in a pretty scathing condemnation, I would say, of the mayor. And, of course, not alone. Tony Mancini, the deputy mayor, kind of expressing the same type of sentiment and suggesting that he should not be seeking more additional powers, by the way of strong mayor powers from the province, but in fact demonstrate better leadership. Do you agree with that? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. At the heart of a lot of this conversation was Gloria. Gloria, you got them going yesterday, so you called in and wanted to follow up today. Yeah, so go ahead.
But I want to repeat what I said, Todd. Here we have Moore Street, one of the biggest topics, and they don't know how much money they've spent to date. And my statement was, you don't know or you don't care. That was a question.
Right.
Yeah. And Tony Mancini twisted it the way he twists everything, and I wasn't even talking to him. And in fact, all the times that I was on the Rick Howe show, I never remember interrupting a taxpayer calling in. I was polite and I listened to them. But this crowd today, they don't need to be polite to the taxpayers. But the one thing that everybody's missing in this, and I know the difference, Todd, because I watch council, and I know Becky Kent and Tony Mancini better than you do because I served with both of them. Mm-hmm. The big thing behind all of this is that their buddy, Way Mason, didn't get elected. These are all supporters of Way Mason. Now, you can believe that or not, but I know the difference. And Way Mason was like Polyev. He had it until Fillmore came along. And this is the bee in their bonnet. And as far as them bringing forward a second motion, Mancini brought that forward because they got a lot of heat for not supporting the motion the mayor brought forward. And, here, because Fillmore will talk to the premier, Savage wouldn't, there has to be an ulterior motive. What's the motive with Houston cooperating with Carney? Is it the same thing? Is Carney using him? Think about it, Todd.
Well, Gloria, I think there is some concern though that the mayor and the premier do have I would say a pretty close relationship, and there might be some concern that the province might be and Tim Houston might be taking advantage of that by kind of working with again these are concerns that some people say. So I'll get you to respond to it.
Yeah.
Do you think? Go ahead.
Todd,
no, that the premier may be using the Mayor Fillmore as a proxy of sorts.
Do you think that Carney's using Houston?
Well,
same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's not read into that what really isn't there. I think that we have a mayor who, when I was mayor, I cooperated with all levels of government. And I think we have a mayor who wants to do that. But the nonpartisan politics always got in, or the partisan always got in the way. And, Fillmore's in for a rough road unless the premier comes forward. And we don't know what kind of powers. And I hope that they are powers that we can all live with. I don't want to see somebody that can do whatever they want to do. Mm-hmm. But I think they'll look at that very closely. And I see it the only way we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
And, to hear, as I said to you earlier, I was not a Savage fan. John Savage brought us amalgamation after he said he wouldn't. So I wasn't a Savage fan. I worked with Mike Savage. I respected him. I never went outside and said the things about him that these two councillors said about Fillmore.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
So look at where they're coming from. And Becky Kent, a professional. I never knew her as a professional, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what she is or what she says. The people, and Todd, as far as saying they don't care, if you knew how many times I hear that when they talk about these bike lanes and the money, you know what they end up saying? They don't care. That's the comment always. So, you have to take it for what it's worth, Todd.
Okay,
Put it all in perspective.
Okay, appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Bill, hello.
How you doing?
I'm well, you?
Not too bad, Todd. I was going to get into it a lot there with the Fillmore thing and so on, but, it's very interesting. I supported him when he went in there. Well, he was over here at Northwood there, and a bunch of us in the table sitting there and so on. Other than that, wasn't too happy with him trying to do a project. And but now he's in the mayor's position. It's interesting. What I find interesting is you've got the premier, PC, and Fillmore, old Liberal. I'm surprised that they get along that well. But this council, unfortunately, is kind of in a disarray right now. But I wanted to throw some questions at your audience, if I may, Todd. Finish me off.
Okay.
I like them. Really, it's not getting the look-see that it should. Now, for instance, to give you an example, I forget how many billions that the government's going to put out fooling around with the QE2. Don't understand it. It's a mess right now that they tore out the front parking aid there. Number one, who's going to get this big fat money coming in for the QE2? So your listeners can check that out, see who the heck it is. It's going to get that. And apparently they're going to take it over after they've redone her. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is the old VG. Now that place is functioning very well, okay, except they got a bit of a problem there for vermin apparently, which that's not a big problem. They can do something about it. And the water needs some new water. So water lines to be put in and a better cleaning service. But when you get in the VG on the top floor and look down at that huge parking lot, huge. This has to be a great gem for apartment builders to get that, and that seems to be in the wind to tear that all down. That's functioning very well right now. And if they want to do something down and take most of the park and a lot of it out of there and put your high rises if you want. So that there needs some hard looks. The other one is Point Pleasant Park. Now, they had a contract for this group that do a little play acting down there in the woods there. That canteen, which has about 50 parking lots, that they certainly don't use all that, which certainly the people going to the park should have access to. That there is up for tender this year. I don't know, it's gone now very quietly. And then what I'm concerned, it's not out there. A tender needs to be put out for what it used to be. It was for food and drink and so on. But it's not. And another one there in Point Pleasant Park comes through the gates, the Golden Gates there. Right in front of you is that beautiful house, the Fripp's old mansion there, caretaker of the park. Last time I heard, Sable Island.
Okay, Bill, listen, I'm up against a commercial break, so hopefully that laundry list we'll have to do for today, pal. I'm up against a break.
All right, good man.
Thanks for the call, bud. Take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Here's an email from Stephen, then we'll go back to the phone. Stephen says this, I listened to a selected number of counselors' complaints about the mayor. In my opinion, they sounded like kids on the school playground. Some counselors who have been in council for a long time have had it easy for the last 10 years with Savage and his clique. They have not been accountable for anything they have done in the last 2 terms. The new mayor and new councillors are asking questions and standing up to the clique, which Cleary and the rest of the clique do not like. As for more mayor power, personally, I don't see any real issues. What needs to be done is very simple. Lay out the ground rules for what the new mayor powers would be. Put limits on what the mayor can and cannot do. No need for a blank check and ultimate power. It's pretty simple. Unfortunately, the Savage clique does not want to do the work. They love playing the politician's game, making things harder than they really need to be. They love to scare people trying to get their way. Shame on the clique. That comes from Stephen. What's your take on this, folks? Do you agree with that or do you disagree with that? This one here, to balance it a bit. This one from Tim says, Mayor Fillmore engaged in fear-mongering by contending that Halifax policies were attracting homeless people from across Canada. He has also attempted to rescind the encampments without a plan. Recently, Fillmore claimed that he reported to the CAO, which is untrue. These are specific examples of a lack of integrity as well as leadership. Then he whines to have power to impose his will. That comes from Tim. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Tim's giving us a call. Hello, Tim.
Morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Very good. Well, listen, you just listened to what went on yesterday between the councillors. Gloria for the second time, and Gloria probably knows it much better than you or I do, and it's abundantly clear that it's dysfunctional at best, and it's unfortunate because there's some very difficult decisions that Halifax and surrounding areas are going to have to make, and if this is the type of leadership and professionalism that we've elected these councillors, I think Halifax is in trouble. And, at some point, there's going to have to be a very serious decision made, and be it all the piping underground hasn't been discussed, and it's just unfortunate because we're taking a step forward and we're taking two steps back. And I just thought the two councillors yesterday, in my opinion, acted like children. You've been elected to have a job. You represent constituents. Do it to your best of your ability. And at some point, you're going to have to be responsible for the difficult decisions you make. And at best, these mayor powers are temporary, because if and when there's a new premier elected, he or she could rescind those powers. So if they were granted today, they could be rescinded at some point by a future premier.
Tim, why do you say they acted like children yesterday? Well, why do you say that?
Listen, Todd, there's some very serious people. The more people you talk to, you find people are in debt. People are just, fighting to stay above water. And we're talking about stuff that, in my opinion, instead of being responsible and proactive, they want either looking for sympathy. But you know what? What is there, 16 on council? Get along, present your cases, and if you don't win the vote, then move on. But at some point, you don't have to be unanimous. You just have to win the vote. But, at some point, it's unfortunate because yesterday I couldn't help but shake my head listening to some of these people.
Okay, Tim, appreciate it. Thanks for the call. Take care, 902-405-6000. Wayne's giving us a call. Hello, Wayne.
Good day, sir. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Well, I'm sitting there having a cigar and I'm looking at my two puppies. Anyway, when you mentioned about the mayor showing better leadership, that convinced me to call you, because you and I, being ex-military, know there has to be structure before you have leadership. And the way I've been listening to this show, I didn't know that the mayor is basically a counselor. And so if you got no structure, if you got a bunch of privates telling the sergeants and the corporals what to do and tell them they're at equal level, how are you going to run a gun like that? Yeah. I'm trying to use the analogy here of your artillery experience. And I know nothing about the artillery. But anyway, in the Navy, we had structure. And I find by listening to your show, council's a poop show. I was going to use another word, but I don't think I can use it. So what I'm saying is I agree with the premier. I think there needs to be a captain put at the helm and take charge of the troops. It's disgusting listening to it. I can't. You know what? Every time now when your counselor is on, I don't even listen to it, because when I listen to that now, it's like listening to Donald Trump. I just turn it off.
Yeah. Well, Wayne, let me ask you this, okay? Some would, including the two councillors yesterday, claim that Mayor Savage navigated those waters and figured it out and demonstrated leadership under the exact same scenario that Mayor Fillmore has, and therefore the accusation is that Savage had leadership ability and was able to overcome that challenge, and Fillmore can't. What's your response to that?
My response to that is he let everybody run over him. That's why we're spending almost $100 million on bike lanes. It's ridiculous. We got people. I talk to people every day when I'm out, and I'm an extrovert. And I talk to people all day long. I talk to veterans all day long. And the seniors are suffering. Everybody's suffering. So why are we – and there's the homeless. Why are we spending this money on bike lanes? So obviously he surrendered to the clique. And I'm glad that when you read that email, Buddy mentioned that, because I wanted to mention it as well. There's a clique there now, and they even brainwashed my counselor out here in Timberley to spend all that money on less than 1% of the population of Halifax. No, I don't think he had any leadership. I just think he let them run over the top of them.
Well, I think it's easy to say somebody has good leadership if you agree with if you agree with them, right? If you agree with somebody, that's an easy way to default to. That's good leadership.
Exactly, and that's what it seems like to me. He's just the last mayor that was in, he just agreed with them and let it go rather than stand there and argue with them.
Yeah.
Can you imagine looking at the sergeant going through basic training and tell him as a recruit, you're my equal? Yeah, you would have had a size 9 in the wrong place.
That's for sure. At least in our day, Wayne, you would have. I don't know about today, but in our day, you certainly would have.
Yeah, you got that right.
All right, pal. Thanks for the call. Take care.
Cheers, bye.
902-405-6000. Look, folks, when leadership is a term that's quite broad, right? What is leadership, and how do you demonstrate leadership? Is leadership convincing people that to change their mind? Right? So how can Andy Fillmore demonstrate leadership? He fundamentally disagrees with the rest of I think there's 4 counselors that are on board with him. There are 4 counselors on board with him when it comes to and at the crux of all of this, the heart of all of this, of course, is bike lanes. That's at the center of all of this controversy, and Morris Street making it a one-way street and all that. So what does Andy Fillmore need to do to demonstrate leadership in order to convince some of the rest of council that we're heading in the wrong direction when it comes to bike lanes? Because fundamentally that's what he feels. And the Premier obviously agrees with him. And therefore, what type of leadership do you need to demonstrate? I don't know. So the mayor went on another radio station and talk show earlier or last week and chided the rest of council to a degree and waded into the controversy, and that's of course sparked controversy back. And now they're not talking to each other; they're talking through us, through the media, which is quite honestly good for us. But I don't know how functional it is. So what is leadership? Is it agreeing? Is it making somebody agree with you? Is it perhaps members of council need to demonstrate some leadership by demonstrating some flexibility? I don't know. 902-405-6000. Victor, hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
I want to talk about bicycles on sidewalks.
Sure.
These cyclists are being forced onto sidewalks, and it's causing big problems with pedestrians. And this has to stop. Either you give them bike lanes to go on there, or motorists are going to have to put up with them on the road. I'm getting angry about this, and I almost got hit this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I did call HRP about it. And it's becoming a big problem in the Nantucket Avenue, Victoria Road, Boland Avenue, and in some cases, Woodland Avenue. Now, you can't have people driving a bike on a 1.5 meter sidewalk that is supposed to be designed for people to walk on. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I agree. It's an issue, and beyond the issue of bicycles, of course, are these what are they? Not mopeds, whatever the heck they were calling them.
No, they're just cyclists. They're the ones that pedal.
Right. But there are other electronic vehicles out there now that people are jumping on that are using sidewalks, in and out of sidewalks, and that's a challenge as well, right?
Yeah. But see, this is an area where the traffic mess has started in 1961 by the then city of Dartmouth. And the councils from then on didn't want to fix it, including ones for HRM.
Yeah.
And they know about it. And, this is in part why they have to, want to use that road too. And I can't see why people are complaining about bike lanes when they're not going to be able to share the street with them.
Okay, Victor, appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. We've got some open lines for you. Get some time for you as well. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, give us a call, folks. Got some open lines for you, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Tom, then back to the phones. Again, give us a call. We get some open lines for you, 902-405-6000. Let's see. This email from Tom says Becky Kent and Tony Mancini did not want any restrictions pushed back from the mayor, such as it was for them under Savage and Mason. The sad thing is that Fillmore spent so much time with Trudeau that he certainly is not without some pretty serious flaws. Well, I'm sure will surface over time, but unfortunately, for the current time we're in, he's the best we've got. Comes from Tom. 902-405-6000. What are your thoughts on all this, folks? A pretty, what I would say, dysfunctional council right now with the mayor not engaging with some councillors, and certainly some councillors not engaging with the mayor and kind of vetting their concerns through us, through the media. 902-405-6000. Ken, hello.
Hi, Todd.
Hi there.
You asked how they were acting like kids.
Yeah.
All you had to do is go back and listen to the tape again. Gloria asked the question, do you not know or do you not care? And then Mancini went off like he was run over by a truck, or she, accused him of taking little white envelopes or something like that. And then Becky Kent, after her cutting off multiple callers, right, and her trying to discipline one of the taxpayers, and he called her honey, and then she goes on this big rant like it's a discrimination
Well,
thing.
I agreed with her on that. I agreed with her on that. That was a derogatory term, which is not needed. So I took her side on that one. So anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's here nor there, Todd. I mean, honey is not like.
Okay, well, let's leave the honey thing alone. The rest of what you're saying, carry on, because what you're saying, I'm listening. Go ahead.
But I mean, they got Andy Fillmore in there now, and he's not a ribbon cutter, or not yet anyway. He's only new to the job, so let's give him some time before he goes down Savage's path. But the reason why they don't like him is because when Savage was there, Savage didn't care. Oh, I'll hold a meeting every now and again, and I'll go cut some ribbons and show up wherever I can get my picture taken, and that's all he ever did, right? And what's he doing now? He's in another no work job or whatever. Congratulations. It's crazy to think that these guys go in there and everybody is a prominent politician. Like there's nobody that's, doing anything wrong or whatever the case may be. It's hilarious, right? When people go, oh, well, I think they're the best counselors, and I think they're this and I think they're that. Wake up, people, right? Not everybody is the golden goose that you thought you elected. And if it's that bad, why don't they quit? No, because eggs at a trough, right? Thanks, Todd.
Okay, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Ron, hello.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm well, you?
Good, thank you. I just wonder, there seems to be division within the council and division within the population. So I don't know if I'm using the right term, but why don't they just do a publicized and let the public make a vote?
Well, Ron, I guess the first thing would be the expense of it. I don't know how much money it costs to do a plebiscite, but it's very expensive to do a plebiscite. Again, I don't want to throw numbers around, so I won't, but that might be one thing, is the cost. And secondly, I suppose we elect people to govern and to make decisions, and that's their job. And some would say the plebiscite is at election time, and that's when, if you like what they're doing or you don't like what they're doing, you can reward them by voting for them, or you can punish them by getting rid of them. So I guess that would be my response, Ron. I suppose.
No, it's a good response. I just wondering, like, the $100 million to build it is quite a sum.
Yeah, for
sure.
sure.
And I just think, obviously that the people are mixed feelings, and the best way to do it is to let the people say their piece and make a vote.
Yeah, perhaps you're right, Ron, and perhaps it'll come to that. Perhaps it might. I've heard a number of people suggest a plebiscite, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying the first reason why you wouldn't do it would be the cost. But to your point, $100 million, and perhaps at some point it would be worth the investment to do so, Ron. So I take your point. Thanks for the call, pal.
And thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Joseph, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. In regards to the mayor and the councillors, I, for one, am in favor of the mayor having more power. However, I will say that when we had the election, everybody understood what their roles were going to be, the mayor and the councillors, in that. Now we have a situation where the first hurdle that is encountered, all of a sudden now the rules have to change in that. And I'm not I can understand the reaction by some of the counselors to say, hey, you know, when we were elected for this job, we're supposed to be part of a council of various representatives of the community, and now all of a sudden you want to take that away from us and almost make us insignificant in that. I would honestly, I would be pissed off with that, if that was me. If going in, I know that, hey, the mayor has, these responsibilities and accountabilities above and beyond what I have as a counselor, then okay, then that's on me if I want to be a part of that type of a system. Yeah. But like your caller from the military, I was an executive in the public service and I was always the one who was held accountable. There was no council, so to speak, right? I would talk to different people, get different points of view, all that kind of stuff, but ultimately the decision was mine. And I think there are times where, I know that for the mayor, I mean, if there's an emergency, it does fall on him, right? Yeah. But those are my. Well,
Joseph, I get your point, but like somebody said, nobody's forcing any of these councillors to do the job. They could step down anytime they want to, right? So there's always that.
Yes, they could. Yes, they could.
If it's that, that's right. So if it's that distasteful to some of these members of council, then leave the job. I mean, they could always do that. No one's forcing them to be on council.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. But for the mayor now, because of the very first hurdle that he can't get everyone over, he's now wanting to change the rules.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you, Joseph. Yeah. But again, what type of gridlock is there? I mean, look, perhaps fundamentally, to some of the callers' points, what is the role of the mayor, and is it just a kind of glorified ribbon cutter? Because if that's what it is, then that's what it is. And like you said, going in, that was the deal, that he had one vote, and he was acted as a de facto spokesperson on behalf of the municipality going to events. But perhaps at election time is when this should have been decided. To I think your broader point, right? Let everybody know going in that you're running for mayor. This Andy Fillmore could have campaigned on it, saying, "I want to be the mayor, but I want to have strong mayor powers, and this is why I believe that's leadership, right? That is leadership." Exactly. So I take your point, Joseph. Thanks for the call.
Good.
All right, take care. All right, look, folks. Yeah, perhaps that would be leadership, right? Going into the election, say, look, I believe that the mayor does not have enough power. These are the reasons why. This is why I think it's needed, and I think I'm the right person for the job under that scenario. And if elected, I will be seeking these powers, as opposed to kind of sneaking in and then doing it after the fact. Yeah, I get that. I do. Again, Mayor Fillmore will be on the show on August 7th. What day is August 7th? I don't know. Vanessa? Next Thursday. A week from Thursday, we'll have the mayor here in studio from 10 to 11. Should be an interesting hour, I would dare say. Speaking of an interesting hour, Rob Thacker when we come back.
X.
All right, the Science Files with Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University, astrophysicist. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. And despite incredible weather last week, we got a plethora of calls. Did we not, Rob?
We did indeed. We completely broke the hypothesis that no one would call because it was good weather.
That's right.
Let's see if it continues.
That's right. Today, another great weather day out there, but it's hot, so maybe people are inside, right?
So here's the thing, right? So if we got calls last week and we don't get calls this week and it was good weather, right?
Yeah.
There's what's called a confounding variable that we haven't figured out.
I see. A confounding variable.
Yep.
Wow. There you go. Okay. All right, folks, give us a call. If you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, let's keep it going. 902-405-6000. Again, we had lots of calls last week, and that makes the hour fun for sure.
Fun.
That's right. So let's help us out, folks. We're asking for your charity and giving us a call. No, just kidding. Give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. And one of the stories that is kind of front and center, certainly on our website today, is talking about in the 4 areas in Nova Scotia chosen for offshore wind energy. And Wind West, this is something that Tim Houston is promoting and looking for a lot of help from various levels of government, which we will need certainly a big buy-in from the feds and other jurisdictions as well that will need to buy this power. What's your takeaway on this?
Well, so there's a few sort of big ifs around this, but I think when you sort of write everything down on paper and you say, if we had the infrastructure, if we had the turbines and so on, would this make sense? The answer is yes, right? It's not really pie in the sky. It's literally, is this feasible from a money perspective? Is this feasible from an infrastructure perspective? And I will give all credit to Larry Hughes, who's done a lot of stuff writing about this in the public domain so people can go and read Larry's analysis. It's always spot on. But my perspective is what the Premier is suggesting makes sense, but there's a lot of things that have to fall into place for it to work, right? And not least of which is private funding. There's also, I would argue, a little bit of a bet on hydrogen as well, and I'm not convinced that's going to pay off. But the main thing that stands out for me is if we have all of these turbines, right, generating over 10 gigawatts, I think, if you add everything up, possibly more than that. I mean, I know the Premier was talking about considerably more than that. Then when you have all of that power being generated, you got to move it somewhere.
Sure.
Right? And that is the key thing of building connectivity. And so a number of studies have talked about this, and any kind of analysis of the overall energy structure talks about the importance of building connections. And so that's just something that we really have to talk about. I will say that the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, has spoken about this and the potential for doing that. But at the moment, there seems to be a lot of discussion, and it really needs to be front and central that we need an east-west transmission system for Canada. I really believe that's true. That's an important part of it. Building out renewable energy sources, being able to move them across the country would be an amazing thing, but there's an awful lot of hurdles to get through for that to happen.
And of course the debate about how green is it, because we obviously massive infrastructure, you've got tons of copper, it's not as though it's just out of the wind and there it is, it's in your home. There's a lot in between.
So yes, that's true. But I mean, there is a lot of effort being put into making wind turbines recyclable. Like a lot of research is being done on this in Europe. And so I think I can't remember what the name of Veritas or something like that. There's one manufacturer that's specifically focused on trying to get the overall recyclable amount of a turbine up around the 90-95% mark. At the moment, the thing that stands out is these massive, massive carbon fiber blades. Right, that is one of the things where everyone is like, well, how do we recycle these things? So they are just starting to look at that. You can always literally crush them and put that in as aggregate and concrete and things like that. But they're just starting to look at ways to recycle that part of it. The steel that goes into the towers, that's all recyclable, right? And then you're talking about copper. I mean, copper's recyclable as well. It happens all the time. So as long as things are actually built in a way where things are accessible and so on, you can actually recycle them relatively straightforwardly. That's part of design, right? Research has to go into that as well. Then, I think it's not that bad.
Yeah, and as opposed to taking something out of the ground, burning it in a way it goes forever, right?
Oh, that's a nightmare, because then you get stuff that's in the atmosphere, and if it's CO2, it's up there for a long time.
And it's a one shot and you're done, right? That unit of energy is gone. That's it. So there's always that, right? Yep. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks, if you'd like to chat with Rob. Science related, of course. 902-405-6000. Dawn's giving us a buzz. Hello, Dawn. Hi, Dawn. Are you there? All right, we'll put Dawn on hold. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. So hydrogen, you're not warm on hydrogen.
There's just a lot of things I don't like about hydrogen as a physicist, right? And so it's not easily transportable, and people will say, well, let's turn it into something else, like ammonia or something like that. And my challenge with that is that all takes energy, right? And so I'm just not big on hydrogen because of that. I can see there are some use cases for it, absolutely, I agree. But as this sort of like magic panacea for energy storage, I just don't see that. And even like putting it in pipelines, hydrogen atoms are really, really small, right? And so when they flow through the pipeline, they can easily get into the surrounding material and weaken it, right? And so that brittling that the hydrogen is known to do means that you can't put that much of it mixed in with natural gas. It just doesn't work, right? It embrittles the metal. So it's not this perfect solution. If you look in Europe, there's a number of super hydrogen projects that are being scaled back quite considerably. And in particular, Germany is now looking at what it was planning for hydrogen usage and is questioning whether it can get all of that hydrogen. So I'm not anti-hydrogen, which is ironic because there is technically an anti-hydrogen, anti-matter hydrogen. But anyway, so... But I don't see it as this universal panacea that some people seem to think. And it has a role, and you could build what's called hydrogen hubs, where places that need hydrogen, I mean, the steel down the road, you can imagine lots of hydrogen being used in steel production. But for the moment, I think most really well-educated people who are looking at this space suggest that maybe of all of the hydrogen projects proposed, we might see maybe 10% of them built.
I've heard that in Germany that nuclear is kind of, they've gotten rid of a lot of their nuclear, and some regret is set in about that. And there's perhaps a renaissance of nuclear. What's your, any validity to that, to your knowledge?
So I don't know enough about Germany. What I do know is Japan.
Yeah.
And so with Japan, they are sort of like coming back to looking more seriously at nuclear again after Fukushima. So certainly in Japan, there is a little bit of what I will call a nuclear renaissance going on. In Germany, I've only heard sort of like anecdotal stuff about the sense of angst amongst some people for shutting down all of the nuclear systems. And they're right next door to France. And France is one of the most pro-nuclear power countries in the world. So... Again, there are obviously drawbacks with nuclear at the moment. It's expensive. It's darned expensive, right? Yeah. And it does the baseload job very well, but you can't wrap it up. You can't wrap it down quickly. So it's expensive, and it's kind of I don't want to say a one-trick pony, but it just does one thing very well.
And, of course, these modular reactors, as opposed to the big can-do reactors, are perhaps a solution, or
no? Again, I mean, there's a lot of debate on this. There's a lot of very educated people who are strongly disagreeing. And so the challenge seems to be, are we going to be able to produce these things, A, at reasonable cost, and B, in a way that doesn't have security risks? Mm-hmm. Right, and when you build a massive, somewhere like Darlington in Ontario, whatever, right, to actually damage that infrastructure, you have to do something huge. Like you've got a lot of security around it. Whereas you have to ask yourself, is that going to happen for smaller reactors? Now, people will quite rightly turn around and then say, aha, but there have been experimental reactors at university campuses in Canada for decades, right? And there's never been a problem, which is true. Right. But if you have many of these things around the country and people are aware of them, I just have some concerns about that, if I'm honest.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files with Rob Thacker. Give us a call. We've got open lines for you folks. Give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. Want to hear from you. Want to take your questions. Again, 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, well, so far the nice weather has put a damper on our calls to this point, Rob, but I'm hopeful that people out there listening will give us a buzz because, look, it's the Science Files with Rob Thacker, and it's a fun, nice way to spend your noon hour. Give us a call, 902-405-6000, if you have a science-related question for Rob Thacker. Again, 902-405-6000. We do have an email from Sean. Sean says, ask Dr. Rob, with ice cap melt, rising sea level, how can there be droughts? Isn't there more water becoming available? And does all water return back to the atmosphere through the atmospheric condensation cycle? Even the water used in is concrete is released during the 28-day curing process. Where is all the water going to cause droughts?
Okay, so the answer to that question is it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is it's not so much that the water cycle isn't sort of moving more water, because it will be as more water is available. It's a question of where that process happens, and that is the key thing, because we'd all like to think that rainfall and so on is fairly regular and even across the surface of the earth, but it's obviously not, right? So if you go to rainforests, for example, there's immense precipitation associated with those.
Yeah.
And so that is part and parcel of the problem, right? That you have climate change, you can have some areas that get heated significantly, and eventually they end up becoming droughts, right? And so there is an example of places literally running out of water because the weather patterns change and you don't get precipitation. One of the challenges is, though, that when you do have precipitation, it goes from being like the regular sort of like drippy rain, for want of a better term, that's like annoying and drizzle, as we used to call it in the UK, and then it turns into absolute downpours, right? Because that will happen if you have a warmer atmosphere. It can hold more water, and then the tendency is, once it's released, boof, you get this huge amount of downpour. And we're starting to see more and more of that, right? And that is a problem. And it's especially a problem when you have things like hurricane systems, right? So those come in with an enormous amount of water being sucked up from the oceans. And then the other thing that's happening if you have a warmer atmosphere is the atmosphere is ironically more stable on a global scale. So those weather patterns are actually, they're forming and being powered by the ocean, but they're moving more slowly, right? And it's not too hard to do the 2 + 2 on that. When you've got more rainfall and moving more slowly, you're dumping more water in one place.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
And that's one of the problems we're seeing with these hurricanes, particularly in the southern US. Not only are they really very powerful, they're very slow moving.
Right on. 902-405-6000. Pat, hello.
Good day. I have a question, and then I'll turn my phone off to listen.
Okay.
How's that?
Sure, great stuff.
Okay, I've been taking the ferries to PEI, both of them while they're in existence, for over 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of breakdowns, a lot of mechanical issues that were frustrating, but I have never in the 45 years heard of the ferries being canceled because of extremely low tides. And I'm wondering, is there something different going on this year with the tides, with the moon, etc., or is it just a buildup of silt and they don't want to talk about it? Dredging. I just know that the last 3 weeks we have had several shutdowns for the ferry. Even in advance, they're given the dates. So maybe you could help me with that?
Sure. I actually, the frustrating thing about that is I think you've actually answered half or clearly clarified two of the things I would have considered anyway. I'm not aware of anything that's really significantly different in terms of tide levels, right? I would think the bigger thing there is actual water volume and what's happening with that. But again, I haven't heard anything significant about that up in the Strait. So then, as you've said, what about sedimentation in harbours and things like that? I mean, again, that's normally tracked though, right? So, because I mean, it's a function of the infrastructure that you have to be able to dock, obviously. And so people are normally pretty good at keeping up to date on what's happening with that. So I haven't heard anything particular about that personally, but I don't know if anyone else out there has heard an explanation from some other angle.
Yes, I tried to get answers off the internet, but it said nothing more than what Marine Atlantic said, that they're having unusually low tide. So I just thought it was different.
Yeah, I mean, we will have a situation where we do have sort of like very low tides because the sun and the moon act against one another. But I mean, that happens all the time, right? So
yeah, we're talking 3 weeks. The last 3 weeks, there's been several cancellations. So that was just something that bothered me.
Sure. So what I would suggest, I mean, you should be able to check this with tide tables. As far as I know, Nova Scotia government publishes tide tables for a bunch of different places around the province. So you can literally go and check. You should be able to just find the most local place on the tide list and then just compare it.
I suppose that's one way of doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's what it reaches for the Science Files. Randy, hello.
Hello, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Dr. Thacker, I was reading in the newspaper the other day about this rather large asteroid headed our way. They suggested that it wasn't going to hit the Earth, but it might hit the Moon. Can you comment on that and give your perspective? And I'll hang up and just listen to your response, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Randy.
So, which one is this?
He's gone.
Okay, so I'm actually focused on the asteroid that's actually coming from outside. So we have fairly regular close flybys, and so one of the challenges is with these smaller asteroids, you don't see them until it's pretty late. But they're small, then they're not going to be quote unquote city killers or anything like that. So as far as I know, there was one that was supposed to be flying by pretty close with today or yesterday. So, but that again, as far as I know, it wasn't too big. Right. So overall, here's the best way to sort of think about these things. If there was a really significant impact risk, we would know most of the time for a large object with several months, if not several years, news. And so when you see people talking about something flying by very quickly, that's going to be the smaller things. So let's say 30 meters, 50 meters, maybe things that are 100 meters across. Those things are difficult to spot until the last minute. Right, so something like a Tunguska type explosion, that's probably about the most concerning thing that we could have actually hit us, and those things are still reasonably rare as far as we can tell. Right, so if you don't see every media outlet covering it, then it tends not to be that significant a risk. And things do hit the moon every now and again. There was literally something 2 years ago where there was a moon impact and amateur astronomers were like, oh, wow, some of them got to see it actually happen.
If something hit the moon and to the point where it could potentially move the moon, is that possible?
It's physically, the physics say no, that's not impossible. But the reality is, are there any things that are big enough to do that? And the answer is no, there doesn't seem to be.
And if that, so based on all of that, the moon's proportion to the Earth is integral to our way of life. Correct?
Yeah. So I mean, the moon is, as moons go, right, big, right, seriously big. I mean, people, astronomers say the Earth-Moon system is almost a twin planet system.
Sure.
Right, because they're so big relative to one another. So again, it's going to take a really, really, really massive object to change the moon's orbit around the Earth.
Mm-hmm. But to the point, not to fearmonger, but if it were knocked off its axis at all, that could disrupt our life here on Earth?
Sure, but I mean, the fact of the matter is if we had an object that was that big encountering, we'd probably have serious issues here as well.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. All right, 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us for the Science Files with Rob Thacker. Give us a call. Get some open lines for you folks. Have the doctor for another half hour. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, we continue with the Science Files with Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University, astrophysicist. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. We've got Rob to the top of the hour, and we get some room for you as well. Again, 902-405-6000. Angela's giving us a call. Hello, Angela.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well.
Good.
Good. So I just wanted to follow up on like what you were just talking about. You're watching like a comet or an asteroid, like that's coming like out of our solar system, and I kind of just like wanted to know what exactly else are you watching for, or anything like along that line.
Okay, sure. So that's the Comet 3I Atlas. So people sort of, how do we know it's from another planetary system? And the answer is, it's moving redonkulously fast. And that makes it essentially have to come from somewhere else other than our solar system. What sets the speed is essentially kind of like our local gravity. Things are falling in that. And if you want to say that sort of like sets a local speed limit, if you like if our local speed limit was 100 kilometers an hour, this thing is traveling at over 300 kilometers an hour, right? It's actually traveling about 130,000 miles per hour. But anyway, so it's going really, really fast. And so it's going to come through our solar system in literally a matter of less than a handful of months. And so it will pass between the orbits of the Earth and Mars. So it's going to be comparatively close. We'll be able to take some data on it. I think the closest approach is October, if I remember correctly. And so
October?
We're going to get a few images of it. It looks like it's about between 6 and 10 miles across. We won't know until it gets much closer. It could have more of a cometary tail by the time it reaches us. There's evidence of a little bit of a tail right now. And so it's just a really unusual object, because the first of these objects to come through was something called Oumuamua. And so that was found about 3 years ago, if I remember correctly. And then we had another object come through that was definitely cometary. That was Comet Borisov, and that came from outside the solar system too. But both Oumuamua and Comet Borisov, they were actually comparatively small, a few hundred meters. This thing that we're seeing through IATLAS, it's big. It's several miles across. So it's the biggest thing we've had come through from another planetary system so far.
Are we going to be able to see it like up in our sky since it has a tail?
Even though sort of like a few miles across sounds big, it's not hugely big, and it will depend upon how much it flares, how much material is coming off. But it certainly, I expect, should be visible when it gets close, but certainly with even a small telescope or binoculars.
Oh, very cool. Well, thank you very much for your time. Have a lovely day.
Thanks, Angela. Take care at 902-405-6000. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to do it. Again, 902-405-6000. Rob, something that I thought that I would ask you about, and it's a little perhaps out of the norm of a science related chat, but I think it's got a lane for it. 902-405-6000, by the way, is the way to reach us if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. But conflict resolution is something that this show and a lot of controversy about issues that go on, and it seems to me that a lot of human interaction is about conflict resolution of some sort.
Yep.
So can you kind of hypothesize or speculate as to how that developed, and how does that compare to other species, and when it comes to conflict resolution? I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but
so this is obviously a massive field, and I'm very fortunate to have worked with some people who are professionals in this field, certifications in it that you can get. I kind of have a very overarching view on this, right? That I think when you get down to the root of conflict and conflict resolution, things really get worse when both sides literally stop being able to see other points of view, right? And I think you can look at most conflicts and you can say when you see that, with some exceptions, of course, but once you get to that point and people become entrenched, then it's very difficult to get people to move. Right, and that's a genuine problem, because that can be down to a number of factors. That can be people projecting onto other people and things like that. But when you see people get entrenched, and literally there's another thing in this as well, which is essentially the same thing. But once people stop seeing the shared humanity of the people you're having a conflict with, that inevitably takes things to a worse situation. So the fact that humans have this capacity, that if we are rational and compassionate, to be able to resolve our conflicts is great. But one of the challenges we have in today's world is that people are literally being fed a diet of conflict, right? That conflict is literally how you promote interaction.
And it becomes entertainment.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So people, unfortunately, when you look at what happens with the two polar opposites of love and hate on social media, people are driven by concern and respond to messages that are polarizing and in many ways full of hatred in some sense, much more often than they do things about reconciliation, which is a terrible shame.
Yeah.
Right. And my worry is that when we become more entrenched in these worlds where everything we're getting is filtered to us, because that's how algorithms work, they try and give you things that you're going to click on, then that is taking us to a bad future, right? Because it's going to make conflict resolution more difficult.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's obviously a lot more to conflict resolution than just that. I mean, in a few sort of even minutes on the show, we can't do that field justice. And in some situations, people have lived through terrible things and harbor resentment because of that for obvious reasons. And setting that aside is an incredibly difficult thing to do in many cases, right? And we shouldn't underestimate how difficult that can be to do and how much something as a simple word, forgiveness, how in practice that can be an incredibly hard thing to do.
Yeah. I guess to me, and entrenched all this, of course, is morality, I guess, and people and the moral high ground and what's right and what's wrong and who defines that. And it just seems to me that the goalposts are probably always moving to some degree. And I could be entrenched in believing something for all my life and then have something happen to me, and the paradigm can be evaporated like that, right? So It just seems to me to be so complex when it comes to you talk about not listening to somebody else or not being open to somebody else's ideas. Sometimes that's a defense mechanism, right? Where we almost become defensive because it starts to threaten our moral fiber as we believe that.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're getting at. In fact, that someone called in a few weeks ago saying, what great books have I read? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't tell you any at the moment. But I'm reading a book by a guy called Alex Edmonds right now, which is called May Contain Lies. And it's about the psychology of bias and how those things play out within social media and things like that. It's a great book so far. I haven't finished it yet. And so what you're saying with people literally looking for things to confirm their worldview is a known bias, right? It's very well known that we will do that. And to a large extent, I actually think that's why social media has been successful, because it's found these, let's say, human weaknesses, and it's using them against us, right? That we do look for things that confirm our worldview. That's well known. That is a bias. And so when I've sort of come on the show before and said, look, one of the best things you can do is to look critically at the things that you believe in, right? Because that helps you to question the things that if you're really subscribing to them, you have to be able to look at that and say, well, because of this, because of that, and so on, and literally ask yourself, is that really true? Right. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do, right? Because we're not wired to do that. There's actually things in our amygdala that go off that give us a reward for not questioning our beliefs, right? And so this is a real challenge for us as human beings right now in the world we live in.
I think of the animal kingdom, though, and conflict resolution is often just simply comes down to dominance and physical dominance, does it not?
I don't know enough to give you a straight answer on that, because there's presumably going to be differences between solitary versus pack animals as well. But one of the things with animals is, in general, they seem to be able to get over conflicts better than humans can. Like, we have very, very long memories. Now, I may be overgeneralizing, but I can certainly look at say, pets that I've seen that 1 minute will be fighting and clawing at one another, fur going everywhere, and then literally 2 hours later they're licking one another and making up, as it were, right? And I think humans are not as good as that in terms of being able to make up after a fight. Now, for understandable reasons, right, we process things differently and so on. We have this immense cognitive ability, but at the same time, it's very, very difficult for us to and literally we can harbor grudges for a lifetime. I've seen it in my own family.
For sure. Okay, 902-405-6000. We got Rob Thacker to the top of the hour. Get some room for you as well. Again, 902-405-6000. If you've got a science-related question, give us a call, 902-405-6000. Science Files continues when we come back. All right, we've got a bit of time left to the top of the hour with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Was there something else we want to do?
Sure. So, I mean, I've been involved in a reasonable number of conflicts at work and things like that. And And there's a couple of things I want to say. And the first thing is that not all conflict is bad, right? That there can be an important place for conflict when bad things happen, right? That's something that has to be recognized. And that can also lead to better outcomes in some situations. But I thought a really interesting thing people might not be aware of is that for a long time, science was done on the basis of a competitive framework. And then when projects got absolutely ridiculously huge, right? So I can think of the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Europe, several billions, then that really required a lot of collaboration, right? And so we kind of had gone from having these elements of competitiveness for the very biggest projects to literally having to collaborate. And that's really changed the overall nature of scientific research, I think, to a certain extent. There still are elements of competition, don't get me wrong. That's still probably the main thing. But when it comes to getting these really, really, really big things done, then you have to build teams that work together. So teamwork has become a really, really important part of doing science.
How about ambition and its role in the development? Because ambition is I would think leads to competition, which can lead to conflict. What are your thoughts on ambition?
I think ambition can manifest in different ways, right? So if, for example, you are a very pro-social person, but you're ambitious, then you can build a career on the basis of being a leader of teams. And if you strongly believe in sort of like empowering the people around you, that today is one of the key things that people look for in good leaders, that you are actually empowering the people around you, giving them credit and so on. And then you can work up through the system from that. I mean, I think the very best leaders I know are people who they wind up getting credit for being a great leader, even though they don't make it about themselves. They make it about the team, right? And that, I wouldn't say it's uncommon, but very often you'll see situations where people really want to be known as the leader, and those in today's day and age, they're less and less common compared to what they were, right? And I think there's an understanding that if you're a leader, you have some responsibilities to the team nowadays.
How about ego then, and its role in all of this? Because I think that it exists obviously, and perhaps it ties in with ambition. Perhaps it's got a role, but then it's got its drawbacks. So what about ego? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, we'll use ego in the sort of negative connotation of overarching egos, big egos, and so on.
Well, I guess, but does it have to be negative, I suppose?
Well, it doesn't have to be.
Is there a positive
right? I mean,
aspect?
I'm not a psychologist. I won't go into the ego and id and things like that. But generally, I think you'll find that people who we sort of consider to have a big ego, and the Australians have a really good saying for this. I don't know if you've heard it, fig jam, which is flip, I'm good, just ask me, right? And so that kind of thing, I think in today's day and age, because we've become so socialized, right, doesn't tend to be particularly successful nowadays, right? Don't get me wrong. There are some situations where, those people rise to the top, but certainly within... Even I can think of many, many years ago when I worked in banking, like the people who were the leaders there weren't necessarily the sort of like, look at me, I'm doing great kind of thing. I tell everyone what to do and everyone does it kind of people. That just wasn't the leadership. And even Dennis Weatherstone, who was the sort of like head of JP Morgan, was someone who was really quite concerned for the well-being of people around him, making sure everything was functioning. It didn't mean he wasn't prepared to make difficult choices, of course, right? But even at that time, I was relatively impressed by those people. So I haven't seen a whole lot of that in the many different jobs that I've had over my career. I really haven't. Maybe I've been very fortunate. I don't know.
Yeah. But I think how we're perceived by other people. I mean, to some people, it's huge. I mean, you look at young people today. Unfortunately, with the online pressures that exist and Instagram and all of that, the pressure to look a certain way is massive, and that has to have a huge impact, I would think, on the developing mind. Okay. I've got a really important point to make about this, and that is that
we're now in a situation where the reality of people's lives versus the apparent appearance of people's lives on social media are becoming very, very different.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of people are struggling with that. Right? And that is a sign that we have a bit of a mental health problem, right? Because there's documented examples of people saying stuff on social media that doesn't turn out to be true, right? Or taking their particular thing that they've achieved and blowing it out of proportion and misleading people and so on. And that kind of thing is a real problem for young people, right? Because when you're young, you're trying to find your way, how you fit in and so on. And you're forming all of these perceptions of who you are and what the world around you is, right? And so if you get very mixed messages in terms of what you see on social versus what you have from a day-to-day interaction basis, that's got to be a difficult situation, right, to live in, right? Really has to be. So I have an enormous amount of sympathy, and quite frankly, we see a lot of mental health issues coming through school and then to university as well. So things are not all right for young people right now. And I know there's going to be, just got to sort it out, get on. No, there's pressures on young people today that I never grew up with. Right? Like, here's the thing that bothers me the most. Like, with these phones, right? If I had a bully at school, I could go home and I was safe. If you have a bully fooling you on your social media, there's nowhere you're safe. Nowhere mentally. Physically, yes, but mentally you're not. And that mental side of things is really, really important to people's psychological safety.
Yeah. And of course, humility and being humble, and that is a great characteristic as well, right? Humility is often not learned; it's often thrust upon us by experience.
Well, for sure, and I mean, people will say that fake humility is one of the most disingenuous things you can see. But I think people who, there are people who are just genuinely uncomfortable about taking credit for things, right? But most people, when they achieve something, they're thankful for the people around them that have helped them to achieve it. And so that's all well and good. I mean, literally, when I noted on LinkedIn I was stepping down from a position I had, I was very, very honest to say I've worked with some fantastic people and I'm thankful for that, right? And I am.
Yeah. Yeah, not false modesty. We're talking genuine humility is I think is a virtuous trait.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a very fine line between those two things sometimes, and it's difficult, right? Because when you see people who are very successful, and then they're sort of like talking about all of these things, like that does create a little bit of a disconnect sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're like, really? Is that, or did you rely on your personal brand to get there, and so on? So yeah, I get where you're coming from. And
I'm trying to be nice, and you're being a skeptic today, Rob.
No, I'm not.
I'm
just talking about the difficulty of the messaging in the world that we live in right now, right? And it is a real challenge. Like, I can think of situations where I've seen people who I know think highly of themselves, say these things on social media to get people to feel sorry for them. And I'm like, I know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah,
right? And so that makes me sound terrible. But no, I genuinely have concerns about that kind of messaging being misunderstood by people.
For sure. You're away next week, correct?
I'm away next week, yep.
Okay, so no Science Files next week, but you'll be back the following week.
Yep.
Rob, great chat as always. Thanks, my friend. I appreciate it. Are you going away somewhere? Or?
Just checking in on my wife's parents. Yep.
Nice. Safe travels, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks, pal.
Thanks a lot.
All right, that's Rob Thacker. That's the Science Files. We do that each and every Tuesday. Again, a reminder, Rob will be away next week. We'll figure out what we're going to do. Vanessa will have to come up with something, right? We'll figure it out anyway. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass, the control boards. Doing a fine job. As always, thanks for listening, everybody. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.